Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Precious Styling. If you're a new subscriber, you're highly welcome to the family, and if you're a returning subscriber, I love you. In today's video, I'm going to be showing the drafting process of this Milkmaid flared dress, and if you're interested in sewing content such as this, you want to click on the subscribe button and give the video a like so you can be part of this family. And without delay, let's get started. We begin by cutting the top part of the dress, and what I have here is my starting line of 0.5 inch. Placing my tape at the starting line, I went ahead to take my shoulder to chest measurement of 9 inches and I marked that there. I also went on to take my shoulder to bust measurement of 11 inches. I also ruled a line there. I also went ahead to take my shoulder to under bust measurement of 14 inches. I ruled a line at that point as well. And finally, I went on to take my shoulder to waist measurements of 16 inches. I ruled a line there, and the remaining 0.5 inch at the base of the pattern would be for my stitching allowance. This dress will be having a completely different type of neckline, but for now, I went ahead to take my neck's width at 3 inches and my neck's depth at 3 inches as well, and I'll use a curve to connect both points together. Now that is done, I'll proceed to take my shoulder span of 7 inches. My shoulder span is 14 inches. 14 inches divided by 2 is 7 inches, and I'll mark that as well. From that point, I'll take my shoulder slope of 1 inch and I'll connect that to the neckline. From here, we're going to determine our armhole's depth, and this can be calculated by dividing your bust circumference by 6 and adding 1.5 inches to whatever you get. So when I calculated mine, I got 8 inches. So placing my tape at the shoulder slope, I went down by 8 inches, and that already falls at the chest line as you see there. So the chest line would also be my armhole depth. And I'm going to rule a straight line from the slope to my chest line. So we'll proceed to create our armhole. We're going to divide our armhole's depth by 2, and as you know, the armhole depth is 8 inches. 8 inches divided by 2 would give 4 inches. So I'm going to mark 4 inches on that line. Placing your tape at the armhole line, which doubles as the chest line, you're going to take your bust circumference divided by 4. I took mine and I marked that there on that line. And from that point we marked 4 inches. On the armhole depth, you're going to come in by 0.5 inch, and from that point you're going to rule a slant line to the shoulder and proceed to connect it to the part we marked on the chest line. Would proceed to take our dart, placing my tape at the bust line. My bust span is 9 inches. 9 inches divided by 2 is 4.5. So I'm going to mark 4.5 on that line. And I'm also going to mark that on the waistline, and from that point I'm going to connect a straight line all the way to the bust line. So I'll be taking my waist and under bust darts. I'll place my tape on the nipple to nipple line at the waistline there, and I'm going to come out on both sides by 0.75 inch. And on the under bust line, I'm going to be coming out on both sides of the nipple to nipple line by 0.75 inch as well, and would be rolling a straight line connecting those points on both sides. From the darts at the under bust, you'll be connecting a curve to the bust line. Now you do not need to make your curve very rounded, just make it slightly curvy and connect it on both sides. From here, we'll begin imputing our circumferential body measurements. So we'll begin with our bust circumference. My bust circumference divided by 4, I'm going to mark that there, and I'm going to be adding 2 inches allowance to that. We'll also proceed to the waistline, and we're going to divide our waist circumference by 4. I'm going to mark that there. Would replace the 1.5 inches that we gave on the waistline, and I would also be adding 2 inches allowance to that. So we'll be connecting point A to point B using a ruler. Now you're going to account for the unequal shoulder to waist measurement of the front and back body. As you know, the front and back shoulder to waist measurement are not always equal. So the difference between my shoulder to waist measurement at the front and back is 2 inches. So I marked that 2 inches below the bust line, and I'm going to connect that to the peak of the nipple to nipple line. At this point, we'll be creating our cup. So you see this point between the armhole line and the armhole curve. You're going to be taking the middle of that part and you'll mark that there. And from that part you marked, you are going to connect it to the underbust dart. And at the center front, we are going to determine how the style of the cup is going to be. So I want the cup to just go about 1.5 inch from the underbust line, and from that 1.5 inch I marked, I'm going to be connecting it to the underbust dart. This is me trying to determine the depth of my neckline. I do not want it to really expose my cleavage. So from the shoulder line, I'm going to come down by 8 inches and I'm going to mark that and connect a line to 8 inches as well on the armhole line. And this would be my new neckline. I decided to tweak this style to my preference. I do not want tiny straps at the shoulder. Rather, I want to give it some sort of Queen Anne neckline. So I came in by 2.25 inches from the armhole curve and I marked that there. And I'm going to connect that point to the initial neckline. So the only thing left now is that I'm going to be giving this part here an allowance of 0.5 inch for the shoulder joining. Because of the shortage that may occur when we try closing up the bust dart, I just came out by 1 inch and I'm going to create some sort of triangle. I will begin cutting out the pattern. Just watch carefully how I cut this. Please, if you've watched up to this point, give the video a like. If you've been watching my videos without subscribing, please do well to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future tutorials. Thank you. We would also be closing up the bust dart, so I just slashed the darts below the bust line. And in order to do that, we are going to be transferring the bust dart to the neckline of the cup. So I'm just going to elongate the nipple to nipple line up to the neckline, and I'll slash through the line we just rolled. Note, I'm not severing this piece from the entire pattern. I left a little part that connects them. Now I'll pick the lower dart we slashed through and I'll adjust it to the bust line and seal it up with my sellotape. You can now see what we have here, and you can see that there is a little bit of shortage going on at the side of the cup. So I'm going to use my curve to smoothing out that side of the cup and account for that shortage. And I'll also continue the side line of the cup up to the armhole. And for the side there, I'll put a piece of paper underneath that place, and I'm going to place my sellotape on that area, and I'm going to smoothing out the shortage that occurred as a result of us closing up the dart. And after that, I'll just smoothing up that area and I'll be cutting out the unwanted parts. Now that we've transferred the dart to the top of the cup, we won't be closing it up by stitching it. Rather, we'll be broadening this cup later on. So I just went ahead and placed the paper underneath that area, and I'm going to place my sellotape on it to hold it down. This cup is going to be slashed and spread eventually, so closing up the dart this way isn't a bad idea, since it will still be spread out on a larger scale. So after that, I'm just going to continue the shape of the cup and then cut out the pattern underneath that area. Now I'll cut out the remaining part of this pattern, and as you can see, I didn't cut out the dart on the cup, so I separated the dart on the lower bodies, and I'm going to close this up using my sellotape, and this is how the entire pattern looks like at the end of the day. I already measured the top part of my cup and I got 8 inches as total length, and I'm going to be dividing this cup into 4 pieces. So I decided to give it 2 inches on each part at the top. So I'm going to be leaving space of 2 inches all the way to the side of the cup. And at the bottom of the cup, I'm going to divide it into 4 pieces as well, and I'm going to use a space of 1.5 inch for each part. I would rule lines to connect the point at the top to the point at the bottom, and later on would be splitting this into 4 pieces and then spreading them out on our fabric. For the back pattern, I've already partitioned my zipper allowance line, and all our subsequent circumferential measurements would begin from the zipper allowance line rather than the initial border line of the pattern paper. And I left a space of 0.5 inch at the top for my starting line, and I would begin taking all my vertical measurements from this line. So from that line, I went down by 9 inches to mark my chest line, and I'll mark that there. From that starting line, I also went down to mark my bust point at 11 inches. I also went ahead to mark my waistline at 14 inches, and I left a space of 0.5 inch at the bottom for my stitching allowance. We're also going to create our neckline, and I'm using a neck width of 3 inches and neck depth of 1 inch, which will later be altered to fit the style we're trying to create. And I'll connect both points together. From this point, we'll be marking our shoulder span, and my shoulder span divided by 2 is 7 inches. I would mark that there. And from that point, I'll be coming down by 1 inch to create the shoulder slope, and would rule a slant line to connect the neckline to the shoulder slope. We'll be going down from the slope by 8 inches to get our armhole depth. And at the chest line, we're going to be taking our bust circumference divided by 4, and I'll mark that there. And we'll be creating our armhole from the armhole line to the point we marked on the chest line. We'll be taking our darts at the chest line. I'm going to measure my bust span divided by 2, and I'll mark that there. And we'll be taking that measurement at the waistline as well. I'll be coming down by 1 inch from the chest line, and we're going to connect both points on a straight line. And from that point, we're going to come out by 0.5 inch on both sides of the line. Then we'll connect both points to the peak of the dart line. At the zipper allowance line, we'll be eliminating any zipper bulge that may occur. So from the zipper allowance line, I came in by 1 inch, and I'm going to connect that up to the neckline. This slant is going to take away any zipper bulge that may occur. Henceforth, all our circumferential body measurements will be taken from this zipper allowance line we just created, rather than the initial zipper allowance line. Now we'll be imputing our circumferential body measurements, and I'll place my tape on the chest line and take my bust circumference divided by 4. I would mark that there, and I'll also give 2 inches allowance to that. I'll place my tape on the waistline as well, and I'm going to take my waist circumference divided by 4, and I'm also going to replace the dart we took, which amounts to 1 inch. I'm going to add 1 inch to that measurement we took, and then I'll add 2 inches as allowance. We'll then connect the points we've made by rolling a line. So we'll be creating a new zipper allowance line, which would be slants from top to bottom. So I'm just adding 1 inch on that line, and I'll be connecting it to the 1 inch line at the bottom. As it is, the slant region will now be our new zipper allowance. For the back's neckline, I'm going to be going up from the chest line at the armhole now by 1 inch, but I'm going to be maintaining the depth of the chest line at the center back. So I'm going to be connecting that 1 inch I marked to the chest line at the center back. You may choose to give the back a different neckline. Just make sure that what you did at the armhole of the front tallies to what you did at the back, so that the front and back are equal. I chose to give mine a curve. You can choose to make your neckline straight. And just as we created the yoke, we're going to come in from the armhole line by 2.25 inches, and I'm going to connect that to the neckline at the top. I would give the shoulder stitching allowance of 0.5 inch. We would be cutting out the pattern. And now I'll be closing up my darts with the help of my sellotape. The This African Ankara prints are what I'll be using for the gown. This right here is 1 yard and this other one is 1¼ yard, and I'll be using this for the ruffles while I'll be using the other one for the entire dress. So backstage, I already folded my fabric in two, as you can see, and I'm going to be folding this again diagonally. From the base there, I want to check how long the flare is going to be. So I want the flare to be about 14.5 inches. So I placed 14.5 inches at the base, and I'm going to mark what I have there at the top. So right now we're going to adjust this tape in such a way that it would accommodate our waist circumference divided by 4. Personally, I'll be adding 2 inches allowance to this and our zipper allowance of 1 inch on both sides. For example, my waist circumference plus 2 inches would give 30 inches. 30 divided by 4 is 7.5 inches, and if you add 1 inch zipper allowance to both sides, that will give you about 9.5 inches. So create a curve with this measurement in mind. So from the slant line there, we're going to go down by the same 14.5 inches, and once we get that point there, we are going to be moving to other parts of this fabric, and we're also going to mark 14.5 inches there, and we're going to connect it to the other side where we marked 14 inches initially. Now we can begin cutting out our flare. And when I opened up my flare, this is how it looked like. We're just going to measure the overall length at the base of this flare. So I'll place my tape at one end of the flare, and I'll begin passing the tape up to the other end. Mind you, this flare is on fold, so whatever I get would be multiplied into 2. What I got on fold was 40 inches. That means the total length of the flare is 80 inches, and this will determine how long the ruffle at the base would be. My ruffle would be twice the length of this flare, about 160 inches. And you can make the ruffle as long as you want, even up to 320 inches in length, depending on how much fabric you have or how full you want the dress to be. And with this, we've come to the end of the drafting process of this dress. In the next video, I'll be showing how I sew this dress together. And if this video was helpful, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye for now.